Hey y'all, HH-BlueDynamite here. The number 2 has been blue, and yeah, I pretty much knew what I was getting myself into when I was planning on making these videos and how it's going to make some people mad. The previous video very much proved that for me. It is what it is. Everyone has their own opinion, and as do I. And I still plan on sharing my own opinions and takes on Bleach. Ichihime as a concept and away from the general narrative while keeping their backstories can very much well be cute. It can actually be very precious. However, Ichihime in canon generally does not seem like it's been written well. It felt very much one-sided. It felt slightly shallow. And before I continue on, I kind of want to share a small bit about shipping in general. Because this is something I've kind of noticed with some shippers, in that I've noticed that they tend to take shipping a little bit too far. And hell, that's part of the reason why I don't ship much anymore. Like reality TV shows, seriously. Sometimes I wonder if these people are only watching these shows or reading the books or the manga in this case to see who gets to get together in the end instead of digesting the actual story that it's not, in the romance genre. There is nothing wrong with shipping. It's only a problem when the ship itself is rather problematic or when death threats are sent. Sorry if you see the mouse. I'm gonna go ahead and admit that I had no idea that Orihime had a crush on Ichigo until her confession. I'm just not observant about stuff like that. Happened with Toy Story, actually. I didn't know that Buzz had a thing for Jesse until he was in his Spanish mode. And even then, it still didn't click for me. I just didn't care much for stuff like that. I was also confused as to why she even went to Ichigo instead of Tatsuki, her best friend, and who protected her from bullies. The person who gave Orihime the reason to fight. Yeah, that wasn't Ichigo. That was Tatsuki. I have watched the anime first before I actually read the manga, and the manga does show her having a crush on Ichigo better, or at least it's more like a interest, perhaps. And that's pretty much it on the matter. At the time, I did think that her confession was cute and stuff, until now, when I'm, rewatching it again. How she went about it was a bit of a no-no for me. Her attempting to kiss Ichigo, who was still unconscious, and had no indication that he was interested. Yeah, it don't look good. Plus, there's an aspect of Orihime that isn't addressed much in some circles, in that she is selfish. She's actually prone to jealousy, and she's admitted it before too, as you can see with these manga panels I've shared. And she hated that part about herself. She finds it disgusting. Does that make her a bad person? Oh, hell no. It makes her flawed, like everyone else. Each and every one of us have been selfish, have been prone to moments of jealousy. And don't you dare deny it, because you know that is a full-blown lie. But that doesn't stop her from wishing she wasn't this type of person. She's, in a sense, wanting to reject that part of herself. This does actually bring up a peculiar thing about Orihime and her views of herself and of Ichigo. I want to bring up Orihime's daydreams and imaginations. And I gotta say, I kind of wish they weren't cut from the anime. Her imagination just goes to really bonkers territory. But they do show how she kind of views Ichigo in very weird ways, including the one that was in, the not the Thousand Year Blood arc, the Fullbringer arc. And it kind of shows how much Orihime's character had stagnated. And I'll go into that when I make a video about her. I'm curious about how their first interaction went down. And I mean, like, before the main story started. Because I have a vague recollection of hearing about this thing where Orihime used to have been afraid of Ichigo because he never smiled. And I think that also extends out to Uryu too, because he also doesn't smile as often. So what changed? I honestly think it was when Ichigo learned about Orihime being that girl whose brother had died in the clinic. And the fact that, Orihime was that girl who dragged her brother to that clinic. And maybe in this moment of realization and empathy Ichigo might have showed at that moment, that's where Orihime saw that. And that's when she started to fall in love. She started to fall in love with Ichigo's his more empathetic, caring side. And it kind of evolved from there, where she kind of focuses on this aspect of Ichigo and how in different versions of him revolved around that, as well as her idealistic scenarios that she wished could happen. But it couldn't, and it never will, because that's just not Ichigo. In fact, I'd say that the emergence of Ichigo's hollow self, his mask, has started to challenge Orihime's idealistic versions of Ichigo. She probably would not like how it would ruin her mental image of him, and later grew to be scared of it, which persists into the Thousand Year Blood War arc. Orihime becomes scared of something that is a part of Ichigo, that is Ichigo, something he really has no technical control over, of it existing. Orihime probably up still into the Thousand Year Blood War arc saw it as a monster. Orihime wants to reject that she's a jealous person. She wants to reject an aspect of Ichigo that threatens her view of him. She wants to love his caring, empathetic side while ignoring or rejecting his other sides. On Ichigo's side of things, I generally don't think he saw her as any more than a friend. He never really, to me, he's never shown that he was interested in her like that. And I mean, I have people tell me that they are very much close, and it's even like said so, like in this one manga panel. But here's the thing about it: in this manga panel, when Ichigo was asked if he was close to Orihime, he at first said not really, before saying, well, kinda. And that's apparently them thinking that, like, oh, he's trying to avoid the subject. He really isn't. His attitude more comes across like this. Not really. Oh, well, kinda, I guess. Like that. That sort of like attitude towards it. Because given what he knows so far about Orihime, I can get why he would say it like this. He had recently learned about something very personal about Orihime, either from Orihime herself or Tatsuki. About, Orihime being that girl who carried her brother to the clinic, whose brother died in that very same clinic. I am not sure how that conversation would have started, considering that Ichigo doesn't seem to be the type to put himself in somebody else's business like that. In a sense of, that they're not need to be saved, that sort of deal. A la My Hero Academia. I would say that maybe that Ichigo probably had a vague recollection of Orihime from when she, dragged her, Sora over to the clinic, which Yeah, that'd be kind of hard to forget. He might forget the face, but he can't forget the moment. In learning this and connecting those dots, Ichigo very likely felt bad for Orihime's loss, very likely thinking about his own loss. And even then, we don't see them hang out with each other all that, like, at all. Like, yeah, he knows something very personal about Orihime, but it's not like he does anything with that information. In fact, Ichigo said it was only recently that he learned about Orihime's past. I would wager that as recent as April of that year when they first started high school. Unless he went to a different middle school, because I'm not sure how many middle schools there are in Karakura Town, or just attended different classes from Orihime and Tatsuki. And, that's where I get my confusion in, considering that, Tatsuki and Ichigo lived in the same neighborhood. And that line's a little weird in that manga panel. She's best friends with this guy, which is, I don't know who did that translation, but that is awful. She's best friends with this guy I've known since 8th grade. Ichigo's known Tatsuki longer than that. They're childhood friends. And yet, because, like, it makes me think they very likely, like, went to the same middle school. But unless Ichigo has not been in the same class as Tatsuki and Orihime, he has never interacted with Orihime until high school. I have had people pointing out to me moments where Ichigo to them was clearly infatuated with her, showing that he is interested. It really doesn't look like that to me. These moments of Ichigo's apparent infatuation seems to be taken out of context. Like in these moments, pretty much like very early, semi-early, and no, very much early in the manga. The first interaction we saw of them two in chapter 2, Ichigo seemed more put off or overwhelmed by Orihime's high enthusiasm. No, there's no blush on him. Cause like, it seems for them, all Ichigo needs to be doing is being sweaty and his heart racing. Yeah, in that scene, he's sweating again. I think it's because he's a little overwhelmed or just a little put off by the enthusiasm, because that's usually just a sign of like uncomfortableness. Again, there's no hint of a blush. And the other two times were just Ichigo being startled by Orihime, because like you see the heart palpitating, I guess, bum bum bum. And when he was trying to give her a drink, yeah, that's him being startled by her reaction. Same thing from, yeah, chapter 3. His heart racing in these moments has nothing to do with any hint of romantic interests. I have seen hardcore fans gushing over Ichigo's apparent puppy eyes at Orihime, which looks like the same eyes he gives other people. In all honesty, Ichigo seems more expressive with other characters, and that includes the villains. One of the main criticisms of the Hueco Mundo arc was that it was more or less a rehash of the Soul Society arc, and it kinda is. Ichigo gets beat down within an inch of his life, girl gets taken to a different realm, and Ichigo goes to that realm to save that girl. And maybe there is some truth in that. Maybe there is a point in that. Orihime did go willingly to Hueco Mundo, sort of. Not willing. I don't know why I thought that. But she wanted to protect Ichigo. But once she was there, she was hoping that he would rescue her. Perhaps Orihime wanted to see if Ichigo cares as much as her as he does towards Rukia. The thing is, with Ichigo was that he went to Hueco Mundo for other reasons outside of rescuing her. Grimjow, during their fight, in Las Noches pretty much accuses Ichigo of wanting to fight Grimmjow, that Orihime's rescue was just an excuse to go to Las Noches. I kind of don't want to say that it was a bonus or an excuse, rescuing Orihime, because he does care for her. I don't think he was actively looking for Grimmjow when going to Las Noches. He was there to rescue Orihime, but it's probably like one of those things where he had a thought. If Grimmjow is like, within path along the way, I'll fight him. Maybe something like that. He really did put the rescue on hold to fight him. Even Grimmjow pointed this out. You see it right here. But when you found her, your first thought wasn't to get her to safety, was it? And that's true. In Bankai, Ichigo is fast. He could have easily taken Orihime and knelt and got out of there. Sure, Grimmjow would still pretty much go after them, especially if he goes into Resurrection. But at least that tells you that, yeah, okay, Ichigo is going to get her and get out. He didn't do it. And admittedly, Ichigo kind of did the same thing in the Soul Society arc. When Ganjo got on his nerves, he was willing to put the whole rescue on hold so he could stay behind and, kick Ganju's butt. It was funny and it was petty. And regarding the scene where Ichigo was about to try and save Rukia, only for Ulquiorra to, tell him like, oh yeah, by the way, Orihime, I took her here. And, that ticked off Ichigo to forget about rescuing Rukia and to attack Ulquiorra. People kind of tend to forget that Ichigo's a bit hot-headed. Anything that pisses him off, he'll follow that instinct. And right in that moment, he's mad at Ulquiorra because of his actions. The Shinigami labeled Orihime as a traitor when she isn't. She was coerced to come. And here is perhaps one of the most crucial moments for Ichihime stands. And it was built on mistranslation and misinterpretation. First, none of what happened above Las Noches was romantic. It wasn't until recently that I've learned that there are people who hearken it to Beauty and the Beast and kind of spin it in that way. Obviously, Orihime being the beauty and Ichigo being the beast. The very same beast that Orihime is scared of? This moment was traumatizing for everyone involved. For Uryu, for Ichigo, and for Orihime. Second, before and after Ichigo's Vassalore transformation, Ichigo spoke of needing to protect and help. A lot of people, me included, did believe that this was referring to Orihime. Honestly, don't blame anyone who thought that because, given the moment. However, it wouldn't be until later that we learned something else. In chapters 409 and 420, episodes 306 and 309, I believe, we learned that the hollow Ichigo, quote-unquote, who was fighting Ulquiorra, technically wasn't really Ichigo. It was his inner hollow. It was Tensei Zangetsu wanting to protect Ichigo. And since Tensei Zangetsu is technically Ichigo, Ichigo turning into a hollow was not for Orihime's sake. It was for self-preservation. It was for survival. Orihime's cries for help may have triggered it, as that is Ichigo's character, to help those in need. But after Ichigo's transformation, she was no longer the priority. The only priority was Ichigo's survival. Some would argue that Ichigo was saying, protect her or help her, in the English versions. But that's not true in the Japanese versions when you actually pay attention to the language. In the Japanese version, before the full transformation, Ichigo, or perhaps Tensei Zangetsu, however you want to look at it, exclaimed, "Ore ga mamaru," which means, I will protect. I do think this was the moment Tensei Zangetsu took over to protect Ichigo, to protect himself. And after stabbing Uryu, Tensei or Ichigo, however you want to put it, then said, "Tasuke, Tasuke." Orega tasuke. He was saying help. I will help. There was no she. There was no her. There was no Orihime or Inoue. Given what we learned later, the protect and help her lines in the English versions would make no sense. And then there's those who claim that Ichigo's protectiveness towards Orihime is special. It kind of wasn't. Ichigo's core character is to be protector. It's in his name. It's not exclusive to Orihime. The only reason he would be protecting Orihime, depending on, the fight, was because she's the weakest of the group. She wasn't a fighter. Should be, able to defend herself, but she isn't an active fighter like everyone else. Some have argued how Ichigo would, jump in to use his body to protect her. Here's the thing. He pretty much did the same thing for Chad. When Chad refused to use his great strength to protect himself, Ichigo, did it for him. Chad was, tied up to the chair. You got these bullies wanting to, beat him up and take away his medallion. Ichigo steps in to save him. And it isn't until, he managed to convince Chad that he could use his great strength to protect as well, is when, more or less, Ichigo didn't have to protect him anymore. Because he can fight. It's in Ichigo's nature to protect. The only reason he doesn't show this with others is because, very often, they can fight. They can and will fight. Rukia, Renji, Chad, Byakuya, they can all fight. Ganju can fight. And the thing with Ichigo going to save Orihime in Hueco Mundo, again, as I mentioned earlier, he also went to fight Grimmjow, or at least hoping for a chance to fight Grimmjow. And why is that? Ichigo failed to protect Orihime and Chad from Yami because, his hollow was taken over. He failed to protect Rukia from Grimmjow. His role as a protector was put into question, but all these failures in Grimmjow put that final nail in the coffin. Another argument was that Ichigo treated Orihime differently. And he does. That's true. She's not Rukia. She's not Tatsuki. She's not Kego. She's not Chad, Uryu, Renji, Byakuya, or Kenpachi. Orihime is generally a sweet and friendly girl, sort of like Yuzu, Ichigo's sister. He wouldn't treat someone like that like how he would treat, Kego, Renji, or Kenpachi. Also, Ichigo showing concern for Orihime's well-being isn't more proof of romantic interest. It's not romantic to care for someone. It's just, being a decent human being. And with Orihime, it's a little concerning when she often downplays whatever happens to her, be it nearly getting hit by a car or exhausting herself. Niceness isn't enough evidence for romance. Yes, Ichigo could relate to Orihime about loss. You could say the same thing when he's trying to relate to Uryu, having loved ones killed by hollows. This right here was a last minute addition to the slide, because I realized that, I remembered that, outside of, Ichigo and Orihime, they have better connection, they have better chemistry with other characters. For Orihime, Tatsuki, that's a big number one. Uryu, Rangiku, even Ribuka, and Ukiura. In my opinion, she has better chemistry with Ukiura than she does with Ichigo. And I did add Rukia there too, mostly because, I could see the chemistry there. There is very much chemistry there. It's just that, unfortunately, there's, again, with the whole Orihime being somewhat, jealous and selfish, her jealousy, towards Rukia, and the fact that she didn't go to Soul Society to save Rukia. Orihime and Chad didn't go to save Rukia. They went to go help Ichigo. The only ones who were very much willing to go there to save her was Ichigo and Uryu. But I was about to say something about that, but I actually would save that in my video for Orihime. And then of course you're gonna go to Ichigo, and I know I didn't put as much manga panels as I did for Orihime. But like I said, this was a last minute addition to the slides. But yeah, for Ichigo and Uryu, Ichigo and Nell, Ichigo and Rukia. Whoever doesn't think there's no chemistry between Ichigo and Rukia, y'all are blind as bats. And again, he even has better chemistry with the villains too. That's so crazy. I did want to talk about RenRuki at some point, but I realized there really isn't much for a video substantially. Other than the fact that I honestly don't again, I don't have much to say about RenRuki as a ship, other than I never saw it happen. I never seen it as that way. I'm actually more indifferent about it than I am with IchiHime. I was vaguely okay with it despite his own lack of buildup, and there he is, and the pacing and the very weird shifts in focus kind of got in the way of that. I could kind of imagine what they could have done, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've read that manga chapter. Was there a reaction panel? I know Ichigo and Orihime reacted to, Rukia's, Ryatsu dipping from getting hurt by Erinero. Was there ever something like that with Uryu, Renji, and Chad? I don't remember. But I guess in a sense that I kind of call I guess it's sort of similar to Ichihime in that it could very well be one-sided. And in this case, it's Renji who likes Rukia, but Rukia doesn't share the same, feelings. Renji's previous actions before and during the Soul Society arc, notwithstanding the foregoing, I'm sure that there is some form of an apology or reconciliation has happened between the two, between whatever amount of time was happening between the Visor training arc and the end of the Soul Society arc. Renji and Rukia worry and care about each other now. Awesome. Guess what? Friends did that too, And just because I was against Ichihime ending doesn't mean that I haven't thought of ways where it could have been more tolerated or better accepted. Fix one, leave the ending open-ended. That's probably one of the best options for a lot of people, because at least that way you can take whatever. It could be Ichihime, it could be Ichiruki, whatever. Ichi-Ishi, whatever. But, I wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way because that doesn't really help the Ichihime ship as a whole for its canon story. So fix 2, have Ichigo show genuine interest right from the get-go. And I don't mean making him all weak in the knees and gushing at the very sight of her like she kind of does with him. It would pretty much go against the image he tries to uphold as this punk kid who's don't seem like he's affected by anything, when in reality he does. Have him be just maybe a little bit awkward, not sure about tsundere, but maybe a little bit like that when talking to her during the quiet moments when when there's no fighting, not things at stake. Have him actively want to be in her presence while subduing that excitement. Have him be interested in her. And also, additionally, have them paired up during the Soul Society arc. Which I know that means like, oh no, nothing, no cute moments for, IchiHime, but it is what it is, if for the sake of the ship. And side note though, that could mean in a way that Uryu and Ganju could have wind up being paired. And the fact that both hate Shinigami is funnier to me. Where's that crack ship? And fix number 3, at some point, maybe like in between during the, the 17-month time skip, have Orihime confess to Ichigo because what she did before did not count. And have Ichigo give an answer. That he has grown an interest in her. But he doesn't want to pursue it yet. Or maybe they have tried, like Ichigo trying to, like, have a, normal teenage boy life, and obviously doesn't work because he is missing that life in the soul society with, connected to the spirit world and whatnot. At least, like, a little bit of a build-up there. A confirmation from Ichigo that he was interested, or at least gained an interest. Preferably before the 10-year time skip. Before the 1,000-year Blood War arc. And you know what? Since I was talking about the Fullbringer arc before, sort of, kinda, almost, have it so that Orihime, if she really is in love with that guy, have it so she's able to break free of Tsukishima's control. Byakuya was able to. Why couldn't Orihime? And that's very much it of what I have for this video. And I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. My voice is about to give out. I did like a various takes of this, but I keep getting interrupted one way or another. So hopefully this turned out okay. Because I don't want to keep talking to the point I lose my voice. But I don't hate the ship in of itself. I hate how it was treated. I hate how Orihime was treated throughout the story. And again, I'll talk about that for our own video. Like, some would argue, like, well, Bleach isn't a romance. Neither was Naruto. And yet, Kishimoto still was able to give, like, an okay, build-up to, the romance between Hinata and Naruto. Especially with the last movie. But you don't get that with, Ichihime. And it is kind of weird in that, I'm sure people's going to bring up the novels, but the novels themselves are kind of problems. Lore-wise. And not a lot of people kind of consider them as canon. But then you get, like, sketches. We still get a bunch of sketches for, Ichigo and Rukia, which, I mean, they're the main characters. But you hardly get anything with Orihime and Ichigo now that they're a canon couple. Like, I know there's probably, like, two sketches? 3 sketches? But they're, like, very, not disconnected. But it's not like they feel together. Shoot, there's this one sketch of Ichigo with his son and Rukia with her daughter. That if anyone who is unfamiliar with the anime or manga, they would have assumed that that's a family sketch, considering, like, how they're acting around each other. Do you see the problem there? But it's just, again, like as I'm trying to say, this ship, if it was going to be canon, it deserves so much better. Orihime deserves so much better. And now, again, as I said maybe like 3 times already, I'll talk more about Orihime and how her story kind of like went down the hill at some point during the Hueco Mundo arc. But until then, have a blessed day and please stay tuned for more.